Dr. Henry Beaumont died on March 15, 1995, at the age of 78, 3 weeks before his death. Knowing he had only months left, he gave one final interview to a medical ethics journal. The interview was conducted in his Paris apartment, his voice already weakened by the lung cancer that would soon kill him. The journalist had come to discuss his 40-year career as a physician to the stars. But Dr. Beaumont had something else he needed to say, something that had been weighing on him for 3 decades. "I need to talk about Brigitte Bardot," he said, his hands trembling slightly as he reached for water. "Before I die, someone needs to know the truth." The journalist leaned forward, recorder running. What Dr. Beaumont said next would fundamentally change how we understand one of the 20th century's most iconic women. That woman never really lived, not in any meaningful sense, and I watched it happen. I documented it, and I did nothing to stop it. Dr. Henry Beaumont became Brigitte Bardot's personal physician in 1956, shortly after the release of And God Created Woman. He was 39 years old, a respected general practitioner with a small practice in the 6th arrondissement. He'd treated artists, writers, a few minor actors, but nothing had prepared him for Brigitte. Their first appointment was scheduled for what her assistant called routine medical clearance for an upcoming film, standard procedure. Brigitte arrived 20 minutes late, wearing oversized sunglasses that covered half her face. Even in his examining room, with the door closed and curtains drawn, she wouldn't remove them. "Is this necessary?" she asked when he requested she take them off. "I need to examine your eyes. Check pupil response." She removed the sunglasses reluctantly. Dr. Beaumont saw immediately that she'd been crying, recent crying. Her eyes were still swollen, red-rimmed, raw. "Are you all right?" he asked gently. "I'm fine," she said automatically. Then, catching herself, "Can we just do the examination? I have another appointment." That was his first clue. The automatic denial, the inability to admit distress even to a doctor bound by confidentiality. The examination revealed more concerning signs. Brigitte was 21 years old. She should have been the picture of health. Instead, Dr. Beaumont found severe malnutrition. She weighed 98 pounds at 5'7", chronic insomnia. The dark circles under her eyes weren't from makeup. Elevated heart rate, even at rest. Signs of chronic anxiety. Bruising on her arms that she couldn't or wouldn't explain. Tremors in her hands when she thought he wasn't looking. "When did you last eat a full meal?" he asked. She had to think about it. "I don't remember." 3 days? 4? And sleep? How many hours per night? "Maybe 3. If I'm lucky." Dr. Beaumont set down his stethoscope and looked at her directly. "Miss Bardot, you're exhibiting signs of severe physical and psychological stress. I can't medically clear you for filming in this condition." Her face went pale. "You have to. If you don't, they'll just find another doctor who will, then let them. My job is your health, not their production schedule." That's when she started crying. Really crying. The kind of desperate, choking sobs that come from someone who's been holding everything in for too long. Through the tears, the truth came pouring out. She told him about the 18-hour days, the constant dieting, the pressure to maintain an impossible standard of beauty, the sleeping pills she'd been taking just to get 3 hours of rest, the anxiety attacks that left her hyperventilating in locked bathrooms. She told him about feeling like she was disappearing, like the person she'd been was being erased and replaced by something that looked like her but wasn't her. "I don't know how to stop it," she whispered. "Everyone needs me to be Brigitte Bardot, and I don't know how to be her and me at the same time." Dr. Beaumont made a decision that would define the next 30 years of his practice. "I'm going to clear you for filming," he said, "but on one condition. You come see me weekly, not for your career. For you, we monitor your health. We address these issues. Agreed. She nodded, relief flooding her face. What Dr. Beaumont didn't tell her, he'd already decided to document everything, to keep detailed records of what fame was doing to her body and mind. He sensed even then that this was something the world needed to understand. The weekly appointments revealed a pattern that horrified Dr. Beaumont. Every week, Brigitte's physical condition deteriorated slightly. Weight loss, increased anxiety, new bruises, more tremors, but more disturbing was the psychological decline he observed. In his 1995 interview, Dr. Beaumont described it clinically. She was experiencing what we'd now recognize as dissociative identity disorder. Though we didn't have that terminology then, she spoke about herself in the third person. Brigitte did this today. They want Brigitte to wear this, as if Brigitte Bardot was a separate entity she had to operate. He showed the journalist his medical notes from 1957. Patient refers to herself as I when discussing childhood, but Brigitte or her when discussing current life. When asked to clarify, patient became distressed. Quote, I don't know who I am anymore. I is gone. Only Brigitte is left. The famous actress wasn't playing a role. She'd become the role. The performance had consumed the person. The most damning evidence came from Dr. Beaumont's records of Brigitte's suicide attempts. The first occurred in 1960. The public story was accidental overdose. The medical reality was very different. Dr. Beaumont's notes from September 26, 1960. Patient admitted after consuming approximately 30 barbiturates with alcohol. Stomach pumped. Vital signs stabilized. When conscious, patient expressed anger at being saved. Quote, why did you bring me back? I don't want to be here. Patient demonstrates clear suicidal ideation. Recommends immediate psychiatric intervention. Studio representatives refused, insisted on discretion, and rapid return to filming. Against medical advice. Patient discharged after 48 hours. The studio chose profit over treatment. And Dr. Beaumont, bound by patient confidentiality and professional pressure, could only watch. There were 3 more attempts between 1960 and 1968, each one carefully covered up, each one labeled something else. Exhaustion, flu, minor illness. Each time Dr. Beaumont documented the truth in his private records. Each time he was overruled by studio executives who needed their investment functional. But the most heartbreaking revelation in Dr. Beaumont's testimony wasn't about the suicide attempts. It was about what he called the extinction of personhood. In the 1995 interview, he explained, I watched a human being disappear over the course of a decade. Not physically, her body was there, walking and talking and performing. But the person inside, she died by degrees. In 1956, when I first met her, there was still someone home. A frightened young woman. Yes, but a person with thoughts, feelings, reactions. By 1963, that person was gone. What was left was a shell, a performance, a mechanism that knew how to smile and pose and say the right things, but had no internal life anymore. She hadn't died, but she'd stopped living. There's a difference. Dr. Beaumont described appointments where Brigitte would sit in his office and he'd ask simple questions. How are you feeling? What did you do this week? Is there anything you enjoy? And she couldn't answer. Not because she didn't want to, but because she genuinely didn't know. She'd lost access to her own internal experience, he explained. The constant performance, the constant surveillance, the complete lack of privacy. It had severed her connection to herself. She couldn't tell me if she was happy or sad, because she'd stopped being able to feel those things in any genuine way. She only knew how to perform them. This wasn't depression. This was something worse. This was the complete annihilation of a self. The medical records Dr. Beaumont kept painted a devastating picture. In 1958, patient reports feeling empty, unable to experience pleasure from activities she once enjoyed. Symptoms consistent with severe anhedonia. In 1959, patient describes sensation of watching herself from outside her bodies during filming. Classic dissociative symptoms. Recommended psychiatric evaluation. Patient refused, fearing career consequences. In 1961, patient no longer cries. Despite discussing traumatic experiences, affect completely flat. When asked about emotional numbness, patient stated, "I think I used up all my feelings. There's nothing left." In 1963, patient exhibited no emotional response when informed of father's death. Later expressed concern about this lack of response. Quote, "I know I should feel something, but I don't feel anything anymore about anything." The woman the world saw as the embodiment of passion and emotion had become emotionally dead inside. Dr. Beaumont also documented the pharmaceutical dependency that developed. By 1962, Brigitte was taking barbiturates for sleep, amphetamines to wake up, tranquilizers for anxiety, pain medication for stress-related headaches. She was chemically managed. Dr. Beaumont told the interviewer, "The studio needed her, functional but compliant. The drugs achieved both. I prescribed some of them. I'm not proud of that. But if I hadn't, they would have found another doctor who'd prescribe even more. At least I could monitor dosages, prevent overdoses when possible. It was a terrible compromise, but it was the best I could do within the constraints of the system." He'd become complicit in her destruction while trying to minimize the damage. The moral weight of that decision haunted him for 30 years. The turning point in Dr. Beaumont's understanding came in 1964, during an appointment shortly after Brigitte had begun dismantling her career. She walked into his office, looking different, not physically. She was still thin, still exhausted, but something in her eyes had changed. "I'm quitting," she announced. "All of it. Films, contracts, everything." Dr. Beaumont had been her physician for 8 years. In all that time, he'd never heard her voice sound so alive. "How do you feel about that decision?" he asked carefully. She smiled. A real smile. The first genuine emotion he'd seen from her in years. Terrified. Relieved. Terrified. Of the relief. "But for the first time since I was 18, I feel like maybe I could be a person again. Not a product, a person." That was when Dr. Beaumont realized fame hadn't just damaged her, it had prevented her from ever becoming herself in the first place. After Brigitte retired, Dr. Beaumont continued to see her periodically. The transformation he witnessed was remarkable. His medical notes from 1965 to 1973 documented a gradual healing. 1965. Patient sleeping 6-7 hours naturally. No longer requires barbiturates. Affect returning. Able to identify and discuss emotions. 1967. Patient has gained weight. Now within healthy range for height. Reports enjoying simple activities. Gardening. Reading. First-time patient has used the word enjoy in genuine context. 1970. Remarkable improvement in all metrics. Patient laughs, cries, experiences full range of human emotion. States, "I'm finally meeting myself for the first time." 1973. Patient has essentially recovered psychologically from the trauma of fame. Still bears scars, but functioning as integrated human being. Success rate unprecedented in my experience. She'd come back from the dead, but it had taken a decade of solitude and healing. In the 1995 interview, Dr. Beaumont was asked why he'd waited 30 years to speak. Medical ethics. Patient confidentiality. "I couldn't speak while she was alive, and hadn't given permission. Even now, I'm only speaking about general patterns and medical observations, not specific personal details. But I'm dying, and before I go, people need to understand what we did to her. what the industry does to young women, what fame costs in medical measurable terms. This isn't gossip, it's documentation, evidence of systematic destruction disguised as stardom. The journalist asked, "Do you think she ever really lived? Before fame or after?" Dr. Beaumont's answer was chilling. Before fame, she was a child. She never had a chance to become herself before they took her and shaped her into something marketable. During fame, from roughly 18 to 29, she didn't live. She performed life. She mimicked existence, but there was no one actually experiencing it, just a mechanism responding to external demands. After fame, in her 30s and beyond, she finally started living, started becoming a person, started experiencing her own life from the inside, instead of watching it from the outside. But she lost a decade. The decade when most people figure out who they are. She spent those years being someone else entirely. So did she ever really live? Only in fragments, only in stolen moments, only after she escaped. The medical records Dr. Beaumont kept were donated to a medical ethics archive after his death. Researchers studying them in the late 1990s noted that Brigitte's case was textbook evidence of fame-induced trauma, dissociation, and systematic psychological destruction. A 2003 paper, published in the Journal of Psychiatric Medicine, used his documentation as the foundation for understanding celebrity trauma syndrome, the specific psychological damage caused by extreme fame at a young age. Dr. Beaumont's testimony had transformed Brigitte's story from Hollywood gossip to medical case study. When Brigitte learned of Dr. Beaumont's death in 1995, she released a brief statement through her foundation. "Dr. Beaumont saved my life more times than anyone knows. He saw me when I was invisible. He treated me like a human being when everyone else saw a product. He gave me medical care when what I needed was humanity. I will miss him." She attended his funeral privately, one of the few times she'd appeared in public in decades. A fellow mourner recalled. She stood apart from everyone, crying quietly. After the service, she placed a single white rose on his coffin and whispered something. I couldn't hear what she said, but she stayed there for a long time. The doctor who'd documented her destruction was also the one who'd helped her survive it. In 2008, a researcher contacted Brigitte, now 73, to ask about Dr. Beaumont's testimony. Would she confirm his observations? Did she agree with his assessment that she'd never really lived? Her response, relayed through her assistant, Dr. Beaumont told the truth. Every word. I didn't live for many years. I existed. I performed. I survived. But I didn't live. Living requires being present in your own experience, feeling your own feelings, making your own choices. I couldn't do any of that from roughly 1956 to 1966. Those years are a blur of performances and photo shoots and emptiness. I was there, but I wasn't there. Dr. Beaumont saw it. He documented it. And now the world knows what fame costs in medical terms, not just emotional ones. I'm grateful he spoke. The truth needed to be told. The final revelation in Dr. Beaumont's testimony was perhaps the most damning. He'd kept records on several celebrities throughout his career. Brigitte wasn't the only famous patient who'd suffered, but she was the most extreme case he'd witnessed. The difference between Brigitte and others was the intensity and duration of exploitation, he explained in the interview. Most actors work on a film for a few months, then have downtime. Brigitte had no downtime. She was Brigitte Bardot 24 hours a day for over a decade. Most actors maintain some boundary between their public and private selves. Brigitte had no boundaries. The public consumed everything. There was no private self left to retreat. Most actors choose their careers. Brigitte was chosen by her career. She was manufactured, marketed, and consumed. And by the time she understood what was happening, the machine was already in motion. She wasn't a person who became famous. She was raw material that was processed into fame. Brigitte Bardot's doctor spoke after 30 years. That woman never really lived. He didn't mean it as an insult. He meant it as a medical diagnosis, a clinical observation based on decades of evidence. From age 21 to 29, Brigitte Bardot existed in a state of performance so complete that the performer disappeared entirely. She became the role, the product, the symbol, and the actual human being. The one with thoughts and feelings and needs was buried so deeply that even she couldn't access it anymore. Dr. Beaumont's testimony gave us the medical language to understand what we'd watched happen, but couldn't name the systematic destruction of a person through fame. His records proved what Brigitte had been trying to tell us all along, that being looked at by millions doesn't mean being seen, that being desired doesn't mean being loved, that fame and life are not the same thing, and often they're opposites. The world watched Brigitte Bardot live what looked like an extraordinary life. Dr. Beaumont documented the medical reality. She barely lived at all. But here's the redemptive truth, buried in his testimony. She survived, she escaped, and she eventually learned how to live on her own terms. The decade of non-living was followed by decades of genuine existence, quiet, private, real. Dr. Beaumont's final words in the 1995 interview: if there's a lesson in Brigitte's story, it's this: fame is not life. Success is not living. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is walk away from everything the world tells you matters and learn how to simply be. Brigitte did that. And in doing so, she taught us all something crucial about the difference between existing for others and living for yourself. She never really lived until she finally did. And that second act, that was the real triumph.